A child's birth should be a celebration of love, a testament to two people building a life together. But in this story, the moment of joy turns into a scar that cuts deeper than any wound. The heroine, a lawful wife who has endured years of neglect, finally believes that with the arrival of her daughter, she will at least secure a place of dignity in her husband's heart. Yet on the day the birth certificate is issued, her world collapses. Her husband's voice is cold, detached, merciless. The child cannot carry my surname. If Zhao Zhao finds out, she will be heartbroken. Zhao Zhao, the name he whispers with tenderness. The one he protects with his life is the white moonlight, the unattainable first love he never let go of. And to preserve that illusion, he erases his own blood, stripping his daughter of the simplest right, her father's name. For the mother, it feels like a dagger driven straight into her heart. For the child, though too young to understand, it plants the seed of rejection that will shape her entire future. This is not just a story of betrayal, but of awakening, a woman's journey to reclaim dignity for herself and her child. She had once believed that marrying him was destiny fulfilled. They had known each other since youth, and though their wedding was rushed, without flowers, without rings, without music, she convinced herself that love could be nurtured in silence. She told herself, "At least I am his wife. At least I have a place by his side." But reality soon shattered those fragile illusions. Her husband never looked at her with warmth. His eyes always carried the shadow of another woman. Zhao Zhao, that name lingered in every corner of their home. It slipped from his lips in moments of tenderness that were never meant for his wife. Whenever Zhao Zhao's health declined or her mood darkened, he rushed to her side without hesitation, leaving his wife to dine alone, to sleep alone, to endure loneliness that grew heavier with each passing year. And yet, she endured. She believed that patience and sacrifice would one day soften his heart. When she discovered she was pregnant, her world lit up with fragile hope. Maybe, just maybe, the child would change everything. A baby, she thought, would bind them together, would remind him of the life they had created. She dreamed of a future where their daughter would laugh in the garden, and he would finally call her my family. But when the baby was born, joy collided with cruelty. Her daughter's tiny fingers wrapped around her hand. Her cries filled the sterile hospital room, and yet her husband stood cold and distant. His decision was swift, cruel, and absolute. The child would not bear his surname. He justified it with the same excuse he always gave: if Zhao Zhao knew, she would be devastated. That single moment tore through her heart like glass. The baby she carried for 9 months, endured pain for, sacrificed her health for, was stripped of identity in one breath. Instead of being recognized as his heir, the little girl was reduced to a shadow, nameless in the eyes of her father, invisible in the family she was born into. It was the beginning of a life lived in the margins for both mother and daughter. She realized in that instant that her marriage was not a partnership but a prison, one where she existed not as a wife but as a placeholder forever eclipsed by the ghost of a woman who had stolen his heart long before she arrived. The child without the father's name was not just a victim of paperwork. She was a living reminder of a woman's silent suffering, and the mother, though bleeding inside, still clung to hope that someday he would see the cruelty of his choice. For now, she swallowed her pain, tucking it deep into her chest. As the first crack appeared in the fragile world she had built around love that was never hers, the wound that began with the birth certificate never healed. Instead, it deepened with every passing day. The little girl grew, bright and full of curiosity, yet each milestone was met with silence from her father. When she took her first steps, he was not there. When she called out her first word, he did not listen. And when she asked why her surname was different from other children, her mother had no answer but tears. At school, whispers turned into cruel laughter. She doesn't have her father's name, classmates sneered. The girl clenched her tiny fists and fought back tears, but the shame settled into her heart. Each night, she would crawl into her mother's arms and ask the same heartbreaking question, "Mama, why doesn't Daddy want me?" The mother could only hold her tighter, wishing her embrace could shield the child from a world that had already deemed her incomplete. Meanwhile, Zhao Zhao's shadow loomed larger than ever. She appeared at family gatherings, pale and delicate, as if carved from porcelain. Everyone fussed over her, praising her beauty, her fragility, her endless charm. And when she made sly remarks about the child, "Such a pity, she doesn't resemble her father at all," no one defended the girl. Her husband remained silent, his silence heavier than 1,000 words, confirming to all that his daughter was not worthy of his name. The humiliation spread beyond the home. Relatives whispered behind closed doors. Friends of the family treated the child as though she were an illegitimate burden. The wife endured their pitying stares, their subtle scorn, and the sharp sting of being an outsider in her own marriage. Each insult to her daughter cut deeper than any wound to herself. But the cruelty did not end there. One evening, during a heated argument, the husband's mask slipped. His words were like poison. "She should never have been born. If it weren't for you, I would have given Zhao Zhao everything." The mother felt the world collapse around her. Not only was her daughter denied his name, but her very existence was seen as an obstacle, an inconvenience standing between him and the woman he worshipped. The wife realized that her years of patience, her countless sacrifices, had only fueled his disdain. The more she endured, the more invisible she became. And now, even her daughter, innocent, pure, deserving of nothing but love, was forced to carry the weight of his obsession. Every night, the mother lay awake, torn between despair and a desperate wish to protect her child. She had once believed that love could change him. But now, faced with his cruelty and indifference, she began to understand the truth. The tragedy was no longer hers alone. It had seeped into her daughter's life, shaping her childhood into a tapestry of rejection. And this realization lit a small, flickering flame in her heart, the first spark of defiance. The breaking point came one stormy night. Her daughter burned with fever, trembling and delirious, her small body drenched in sweat. Panic surged through the mother's veins as she rushed to the hospital, clutching the child in her arms. She dialed her husband again and again, begging for help, but every call went unanswered. Later, she would learn he was not unreachable. He was simply elsewhere. Sitting at Zhao Zhao's bedside, murmuring words of comfort as the woman feigned another spell of weakness. In the fluorescent glow of the emergency ward, the mother signed the consent forms alone. Her hands shook, but her resolve solidified. She realized that night, with a clarity sharper than any blade, that she had been fighting a losing battle. To him, their child was not a daughter. They were intrusions in a world built entirely around the worship of his white moonlight. When the doctor finally told her the child would recover, relief mingled with rage. She sat beside the hospital bed, watching her daughter sleep, and made a silent vow. Never again will you suffer for his blindness. Never again will you be nameless. The next morning, she walked into the registrar's office. With trembling hands, but unshakable resolve, she requested a new birth certificate. She stripped away the surname that had been denied her daughter from the beginning. In its place, she gave the child her own name, the name of a mother who would stand as shield and guardian. When she held the paper in her hands, tears blurred her vision. This was not just a document. It was liberation. It was proof that her child's identity would never again be tied to a man who could not see her worth. For the first time, she felt a surge of strength, a fire burning through the years of humiliation. That night, when her husband returned, his voice dripping with contempt, he demanded, "How dare you change her name without my permission?" But the wife no longer bowed her head. She met his glare with steady eyes and replied, "Because she is mine. She has always been mine. And I will never let her carry the weight of your indifference again." Her defiance stunned him into silence. The woman he thought pliant, submissive, broken beyond repair, had risen from the ashes. She was no longer the shadow of a wife, no longer the substitute for another woman's ghost. She was a mother reclaiming her dignity, a woman who would no longer beg for love that was never meant for her. The shift was irreversible. For the first time, the balance of power had tilted. He could rage, he could threaten, but the truth was undeniable. She had awakened. And once awakened, there was no going back. His fury was volcanic. For days, he raged through the house, smashing glasses, slamming doors, hurling accusations. But his anger no longer had power over her. Each insult only confirmed what she already knew. She and her daughter were better off without him. Then came the unraveling. The truth about Zhao Zhao surfaced, like rot breaking through a polished surface. She had never been the fragile angel he idolized. She was manipulative, cunning, and cruel. It started with small whispers, how she feigned illnesses to keep him by her side, how she sowed discord in his marriage, how she mocked his daughter behind his back. Soon, the whispers turned into undeniable proof, forged medical reports, lies exposed, and a betrayal so stark that even he could not deny it. When he confronted her, expecting remorse, Zhao Zhao laughed. She told him he had been a fool all along, that she never loved him, only the protection, the money, the devotion he lavished upon her. And in that moment, the pedestal crumbled. His white moonlight was nothing more than a shadow, a fantasy he had sacrificed his family for. The consequences came swiftly. Business partners withdrew, disgusted by his scandal. Relatives whispered that he had disowned his own child. Friends turned their backs, unwilling to align with a man so blinded by obsession. His career collapsed, his fortune drained. And for the first time in his life, he stood alone, stripped of illusions, stripped of power, stripped of the very love he had ruined everything to preserve. Meanwhile, she flourished. With the burden lifted, the mother poured her strength into building a new life. She found work, steady and fulfilling, and though the road was difficult, she no longer walked it with chains around her ankles. Each day she returned home to her daughter's laughter, a sound that reminded her why she had chosen to fight. There were nights when loneliness threatened to creep in, but they were fleeting. For every empty space in her heart, her daughter filled it with joy, with unconditional love that no betrayal could taint. And slowly, she began to rediscover herself, the woman who once dreamed, who once laughed, who once believed she deserved happiness. The final image was not of a broken wife, but of a woman reborn. Hand in hand with her daughter, she walked down a sunlit street, no longer hiding in shadows, no longer begging for recognition. Her child bore her name proudly, and together they carried a legacy, not of shame, but of resilience. Behind them, a man sank into the ruins of his choices. Ahead of them, a mother and daughter carved out a future of their own. Retribution had been delivered. Liberation was theirs. This story is not simply about a child denied her father's surname. It is about the silent suffering of countless women who are told to endure, to compromise, to sacrifice, even when it costs them their dignity and the future of their children. The cruelty lies not only in the man who refused his own daughter, but in the illusion of white moonlight, a fantasy so blinding that it eclipsed love, responsibility, and humanity. But at its heart, this is also a story of awakening. The heroine's greatest strength was not in her patience, but in the moment she chose to stop waiting. By changing her daughter's name, she did more than correct a piece of paper. She rewrote their destiny. She refused to let her child carry the burden of a man's obsession. She refused to let indifference define their lives. And in doing so, she proved something vital. Freedom is possible. Healing is possible. Choosing yourself and your child over toxic love is not betrayal, it is survival. If this story resonated with you, remember this: you are not alone, and you are not powerless. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they, too, can walk away from shadows. Comment your thoughts below. Have you ever witnessed or lived through a moment where self-respect became more important than holding on? And don't forget to subscribe and follow this channel for more Betrayal, Bạch Nguyệt Quang stories, tales of pain, awakening, and the unshakable strength of women who rise from the ashes. Your story may start in shadows, but it can always end in light.